Ah, Middle-earth. A place where hobbits, elves, dwarves, and men coexist, and where one tiny gold ring can cause a ruckus that would put a Black Friday sale to shame. This world has been etched into our collective consciousness ever since J.R.R. Tolkien first introduced it in The Lord of the Rings. Published in the 1950s, the epic tale not only transformed how we view fantasy, but it has left an indelible mark on, well, almost everything else. But before we get going, please hit like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Now, Tolkien didn't just wake up one morning and think, I fancy writing about an overambitious piece of jewelry today. His motivations were as profound as Gandalf's wisdom, and that's saying something. He desired to craft an epic mythology for England, driven by his dismay at the lack of native legends that weren't tampered with by the French. Norman conquest, anyone? Fueled by his love for ancient texts, philology, and probably a pint or two from the Eagle and Child pub, Tolkien gave us a world that is astonishingly detailed and breathtakingly vast. When it comes to the release of the series, it was no less than a literary event. Starting with The Fellowship of the Ring in 1954, followed by The Two Towers and The Return of the King, the trilogy took readers by storm. It's worth noting that the term trilogy here is a bit of a misnomer. Tolkien saw his creation as a single novel, but owing to practical reasons, like the sheer weight of the manuscript, publishers divided it into 3. And while we'll be diving deeper into the nitty-gritty of Middle-earth's influence on world-building, the art of crafting languages, and the allure of epic quests that make our Monday mornings seem pretty mundane in comparison, this introduction is just to get your feet wet. So, whether you're an old fan who considers the Shire your second home, or a newbie just wondering what the fuss is all about, tighten your bootstraps, grab a lembas bread, and let's embark on this enlightening journey together. And remember, it's the journey, not the destination, that matters, unless your destination is Mount Doom, in which case, you might want to reconsider. Crafting Middle-earth. If you've ever tried to create a sandcastle without any plans, tools, or frankly a clue, you'll know it usually ends up looking more like a misshapen potato than a regal fortress. World building in fantasy is somewhat similar, albeit on a slightly more, let's say, epic scale. It's one thing to say, "Here be dragons," and another to elucidate the lineage, favorite snack, and probable Tinder profiles of said dragons. And that is the genius of Tolkien. Middle-earth isn't just any old land plucked from the depths of imagination. It's a grand tapestry woven with millennia of history, songs that are probably older than your granny's china, and cultures so rich and varied they make our annual village fetes look like a tepid cup of tea. Now, Tolkien didn't merely give us a map with some catchy names and say, "Here you go, have fun." No. He gave us genealogies. Who knew hobbits were such avid record keepers? Intricate languages that would flummox even the most dedicated Duolingo user, and a calendar system which would make even the most ardent timekeepers head spin. And then there's the vast sweeping landscapes, from the cozy confines of the Shire, to the ethereal beauty of Rivendell, to the doom and gloom, mostly doom, of Mordor. His world-building was, in every sense, a game-changer. Before Tolkien, we had fairy tales and fables, but post-Middle-earth, fantasy authors everywhere probably felt the weight of expectation. A few elves and a magic sword wouldn't cut it anymore. They had to think about ecosystems, geopolitics, and the socio-economic implications of dragon hoarding. Thanks to Tolkien's meticulous attention to detail, the bar was set sky high, somewhere around the level of the Eagles, I'd wager. This is not just world building, it's world crafting. It's the equivalent of meticulously painting the Sistine Chapel and then deciding it needs just a tad more gold leaf. The sheer expansiveness of Middle-earth has since become the gold standard, pun very much intended, in the realm of fantasy. The next time you dive into a book and find yourself immersed in the nuances of fictional trade agreements or the correct pronunciation of a witch queen's third name, tip your hat to Tolkien. The man didn't just set the stage, he built the entire theater. Created languages. Ah, language. It's that nifty little thing we use to order a coffee, complain about the weather, or explain why we're 3 hours late to a meeting. Dragons on the motorway again, I swear. But for Tolkien, language wasn't just a tool. It was an art, a passion, and quite possibly, a bit of an obsession. Just as Picasso had his blue period, Tolkien had his elvish phase. Now, if you thought learning French was tricky, spare a thought for anyone diving into Quenya or Sindarin. Tolkien, ever the overachiever, didn't stop at creating a few fancy names or curse words. No, he went the full Monty, crafting fully fledged languages with their own grammar, vocabulary, and scripts. This wasn't just a hobby, it was philology on steroids. Why, you ask? Well, Tolkien believed that language was intrinsic to culture and identity. You can't have a millennia-old race of ethereal, long-haired beings without giving them a suitably poetic language to sing about moonlight and, trees. And boy, did the elves love trees. But it wasn't just about the elves. Dwarvish, the black speech of Mordor, the Western common tongue. Each was a testament to Tolkien's belief in the power and beauty of language. With his philological prowess, he demonstrated that fictional cultures feel significantly richer, more real, and more alive when their linguistic roots are deep and well-forged. Aspiring authors everywhere surely threw up their hands in exasperation, realizing that they now had to think about verb conjugations for their fictional species. Gone were the days when a few these and thous would suffice for creating linguistic depth. Now there was a new benchmark, and it came with its own alphabet. Since Tolkien's time, the importance of constructed languages, or conlangs for those in the know, has blossomed. Whether it's J.R.R. Martin's Dothraki in Game of Thrones, or the Na'vi language in James Cameron's Avatar, authors and creators have come to embrace the enriching depth that a well-crafted language can bring to a fictional universe. Races and creatures. Let's turn our attention to the residents of Middle-earth, elves, dwarves, hobbits. They might sound like the lineup for a particularly eclectic village talent show, but Tolkien's depiction of these races transformed them from mere mythological footnotes to headline acts in the fantasy realm. First up, the elves. Before Tolkien, if you mentioned elves, many would picture mischievous little sprites dancing in moonlit glades or cobbling shoes after hours. Tolkien's elves, however, are a whole different kettle of fish. Tall, ethereal, and perpetually looking as if they've just stepped out of a pre-Raphaelite painting, his elves became the archetype for many a fantasy narrative. Thus laden with history, tragedy, and an elegance that would put any catwalk model to shame, Tolkien's elves transcended their previous roles in folklore. Then we have the dwarves, stout and sturdy, known not only for their impressive beards, a hipster's dream, but also for their craftsmanship and love of all things glittery. Under Tolkien's touch, they became a fiercely proud race with a deep sense of honor and tradition. Gone were the mere tunnel-digging stereotypes of Disney's Snow White. These dwarves had culture, history, and yes, a penchant for breaking into song every now and then. And who could forget the hobbits? Tolkien's unique creation, these unassuming little folk with their furry feet and insatiable appetite for second breakfasts, captured hearts worldwide. They might not have the ethereal beauty of elves or the might of dwarves, but their courage, resilience, and love for the simple pleasures of life resonated deeply with readers. Now, it's true, Tolkien didn't pluck these races out of thin air. Mythology and folklore brim with references to elf-like creatures, dwarvish beings, and other fantastical species. However, what he did was infuse them with a depth and richness previously unseen. They weren't just cardboard cutouts used to further a plot. They had histories, legends, grievances, and dreams. And it's this depth that has cemented Tolkien's races as touchstones in the fantasy genre. Many a writer has, shamelessly or otherwise, borrowed, adapted, or been inspired by Tolkien's interpretations. When we think of elves or dwarves in modern fantasy settings, the image is often tinted with a shade of Tolkien. Archetypal characters. Step onto the stage of Middle-earth and you'll be greeted by a cast of characters so iconic they've practically stamped their faces, or in some cases, their precious rings, onto the very essence of fantasy storytelling. While Tolkien didn't invent all of these archetypes, he certainly gave them a fresh coat of paint, a new lease of life, and an unshakable place in our collective imaginations. First in the spotlight, we have Frodo Baggins, the poster child for the reluctant hero. Here's a chap who'd rather be munching on crumpets in Bag End than traipsing across Middle-earth with the weight of the world and a particularly heavy ring on his shoulders. Frodo's journey from the comfort of the Shire to the fiery depths of Mount Doom is the quintessential transformation from ordinary to extraordinary. Tolkien shows us that heroes aren't just made on battlefields, they're made in the quiet moments, the hard choices, and the persistence to keep going even when the nearest tavern is miles away. Then there's Gandalf, embodying the wise old mentor trope. With his pointy hat, majestic beard, and penchant for puffing on a pipe, he might seem like your typical wizard at first glance, but Gandalf is so much more than a spellslinger. He's the guiding hand, the voice of wisdom, and occasionally the bringer of fireworks. He's the mentor who knows when to lead, when to step back, and when to, quite literally, send you on an unexpected journey. Thanks to Tolkien, a whole generation of fantasy authors saw the merits of having a seasoned character who's seen it all, done it all, and still has a few tricks up their billowing sleeves. And, of course, we can't forget Gollum, the corrupted creature torn between his better nature and his overwhelming desire for the One Ring. Gollum is the epitome of the corrupted being, a living, rasping testament to the corrupting nature of power and obsession. While he might be a far cry from the typical villain with a dastardly plan, he's a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought within. While characters like these can be traced back to ancient myths, legends, and folktales, Tolkien's portrayal of them set a benchmark. His characters weren't just archetypes, they were layered, complex beings who laughed, cried, struggled, and triumphed. Their journeys have since become the yardstick against which many a fantasy character is measured. Epic quests. Once upon a time, in the heart of Middle-earth, there was a ring. Not just any ring, mind you, but the One Ring, the sort of jewelry piece that could make entire kingdoms fall and rise. And at the center of the Lord of the Rings is the monumental quest to bid this little trinket adieu in the fiery chasms of Mount Doom. Sounds simple enough, right? But as with anything Tolkien touched, there's more to it than meets the eye. The concept of the quest is as old as storytelling itself. From ancient myths where heroes sought golden fleeces or fire-breathing foes, to legends of knights chasing after elusive grails, the idea of embarking on a journey, facing insurmountable odds, and returning transformed, is a tale as old as time. However, Tolkien didn't merely dabble in this time-honored narrative. He supercharged it. The quest to destroy the One Ring is not just a trek across scenic landscapes, though there are plenty of those. It's a multi-layered journey, physically grueling, emotionally harrowing, and spiritually awakening. Every step taken by Frodo and the Fellowship is laden with peril, moral dilemmas, and the ever-present shadow of the enemy. It's a marathon of endurance, courage, and resisting the urge to simply wear the darn thing. Tolkien's take on the epic quest wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about the transformation of its participants, the forging and breaking of alliances, and the understanding that even the most epic of quests is, at its heart, a deeply personal journey. Since the publication of The Lord of the Rings, the epic quest has become a cornerstone of fantasy literature. Need to overthrow a dark lord? Quest. Misplaced a magical artifact? Quest. Got a prophecy about a chosen one? You guessed it. Quest. While the objectives vary, the essence remains the same. Characters pushed to their limits, facing both external challenges and internal conflicts, all while navigating a world brimming with wonder and danger. Moral depth. Peel back the layers of orcs, elves, and a rather peculiar obsession with pipeweed, and at the heart of Tolkien's magnum opus lies a rich tapestry of moral themes. These aren't your everyday run-of-the-mill dilemmas like whether to have a second helping of Elevenses. though that's certainly a quandary many a hobbit has faced. No, these are the weighty, sit-up-straight-and-think-hard kind of themes, the sort that have been echoing down the corridors of fantasy literature ever since. First and foremost, there's the age-old tussle between good and evil. Middle-earth is rife with it. From the lofty towers of Minas Tirith to the shadowy depths of Mordor, every nook and cranny seems to be choosing a side. But Tolkien, ever the maestro, doesn't just paint this battle in broad strokes of black and white. There's nuance, ambiguity, and a fair bit of moral grayness. We're looking at you, Boromir. It's a gentle reminder that even in a world bursting with magic, the lines between right and wrong can often be as blurry as a wizard's vision after one too many ales. Next up, we have the oh-so-seductive, corrupting influence of power, best epitomized by that shiny bit of finger jewelry, the One Ring. How many have been ensnared by its allure, whispering promises of grandeur and dominion? From proud kings to a certain gangly creature who's overly fond of referring to himself in third person, the One Ring's grip shows that unchecked power can lead even the noblest souls astray. In Tolkien's world, the true measure of a hero isn't their strength or cunning, but their ability to resist temptation and wield power responsibly. And then, there's perhaps the most heartwarming theme of all. The idea that even the tiniest individual, someone who might be overlooked in the bustling crowd of Middle-earth, can be the catalyst for monumental change. You don't need to be a 7-foot-tall warrior or a sorcerer with a flair for the dramatic. Sometimes, all it takes is a humble hobbit with a good heart, and possibly an appetite for adventure that matches his appetite for scones. Since Tolkien laid down his pen, these moral threads have woven their way into the fabric of countless tales, sagas, and epics. Authors across the globe have grappled with, expanded upon, and reimagined these themes in myriad ways. Magic and its limitations. If you've ever dreamt of attending a school of witchcraft and wizardry in Middle-earth, best shelve those dreams. Because magic in Tolkien's world doesn't come in handy, color-coded textbooks, or involve shouting Latinish phrases while brandishing a wand. Middle-earth magic is a different beast altogether. Subtle, ancient, and as elusive as a well-behaved Oliphant. In many fantasy tales, magic is the solution to all life's little problems. Need to light up a room? There's a spell for that. Fancy turning your pesky neighbor into a toad? There's probably a spell for that too, though not endorsed for everyday use. However, in Middle-earth, magic is less about dazzling displays of power and more about the intangible, the ineffable. It's in the haunting songs of the elves, the ancient wisdom of the Ents, or even in the resilience of a hobbit's spirit. And when overt magic does make an appearance, say, in the guise of a certain gray-clad wizard, it's often shrouded in mystery and reverence. But here's the real kicker. Magic in Tolkien's realm often comes with strings attached, or to be more precise, consequences. The One Ring grants invisibility, but wear it too often, and you might just find yourself hosting a permanent ring-wraith party. Spoiler, they're not the fun kind. Even mighty artifacts like the Palantiri or the Silmarils, for all their allure and power, are double-edged swords, bringing both great insight and potential doom. This nuanced approach to magic, where it's less about the spectacular and more about the significant, where every spell or magical act carries weight and consequence, has left an indelible mark on the fantasy genre. Later authors, drawing inspiration from Tolkien, have woven intricate magical systems, ensuring that magic isn't just a tool, but an integral, living part of their world. They've recognized that sometimes the most powerful magic lies not in the grand gestures, but in the small moments, and that every action, magical or otherwise, ripples through their world in myriad ways. History and mythology. Imagine for a moment you're a visitor in Tolkien's study. Tea and crumpets, optional, but highly recommended. One glance at his desk and you might wonder if he's chronicling the rich tapestry of an ancient civilization, given the sheer depth and intricacy of the papers strewn about. But no, this isn't history homework gone awry. It's the painstaking crafting of Middle-earth's millennia-spanning backstory, complete with its heroes, villains, love stories, betrayals, and a good number of epic ballads to serenade the lot. Before The Lord of the Rings even gets its boots muddy in the Shire, Tolkien had crafted entire ages of his world's history. This wasn't just a cursory timeline scribbled on the back of an envelope. We're talking detailed accounts of creation myths, family trees more complicated than a soap opera, entire languages, with their evolving dialects no less, and sagas that would make ancient bards nod in appreciation. The Silmarillion, often dubbed Middle-earth's own Bible, is just the tip of this monumental iceberg. Now, while creating exhaustive backstories might sound like an author's way of ensuring they never run out of procrastination material, it's far more than that. By grounding Middle-earth in such rich history and mythology, Tolkien gave it weight, depth, and a tangible sense of timelessness. Every hill, every forest, every ancient ruin in Middle-earth whispers tales of yore, imbuing the landscape with a poignant sense of both wonder and melancholy. It's this depth that makes us feel, when stepping into Middle-earth, that we're delving into a realm as ancient and storied as our own. Tolkien's dedication to crafting Middle-earth's deep past wasn't just a hobby run amok. It set a gold standard for the fantasy genre. Authors who followed in his footsteps realized that to truly immerse readers, their worlds needed history, legends, and the occasional epic ballad. It's no longer enough to simply introduce a mystical city. Readers now yearn to know who built it, which star-crossed lovers met beneath its silvered arches, and naturally, which legendary figures might have sung a melancholic tune about it all. Maps. Pop open a copy of The Lord of the Rings, and before you even reach a word of the tale, you're greeted by an elaborate tapestry of coastlines, mountain ranges, forests, and the winding roads of Middle-earth. It's not just any map, it's a visual feast, a cartographic love letter to the world Tolkien so meticulously crafted. You see, Tolkien understood something vital. A good map does more than just show you the way from the Shire to Mordor, though it's rather handy for that too. It plunges you, heart and soul, into the very landscape of the tale. Now you might wonder, why such fuss over a bunch of lines and names on paper? Well, beyond the obvious delight of tracing Frodo's perilous journey with a finger or getting a bird's-eye view of Gondor's strategic location, there's something deeply immersive about a well-crafted map. It beckons the reader to wander, to explore, to daydream about adventures in the vast swathes of land labeled with tantalizing terms like Here Be Dragons or Mirkwood, adventures that hopefully don't involve too many spiders. And here's where Tolkien, the astute pioneer he was, sparked a cartographic revolution in fantasy literature. Realizing that a map could serve as a reader's anchor, allowing them to ground themselves in a tale's sprawling geography, he not only provided a reference tool but also an artifact that enriched the very essence of his story. Emboldened by this, many a fantasy author soon followed suit. Gone were the days when readers had to blindly navigate through the treacherous terrains and sprawling cities of fantastical realms. Now, they could embark on their literary adventures equipped with detailed maps, ready to explore every nook and cranny, from the highest mountain peak to the tiniest hamlet. Songs and poetry. Ever found yourself wandering through the lush fields of the Shire, wishing you had a jaunty tune to express your delight? Or perhaps, while skulking in the depths of a dark cave, you felt an inexplicable urge to unravel a riddle? Well, you're in good company, for Tolkien too realized that sometimes the heart's yearnings and the world's wonders can't simply be contained within the bounds of regular sentences. Enter songs, poems, and riddles. Now, Tolkien didn't merely toss these into his tales for a bit of flamboyant flair. Each song, each poem, each cryptic riddle is a thread woven into the rich tapestry of Middle-earth. They breathe life into bygone eras, serenade heroes of old, and capture the essence of various races, from the lofty laments of the Elves to the earthy ballads of the Dwarves. They're like snapshots, preserving moments and emotions from Middle-earth's vast chronicles. Take, for instance, the mournful song of the Ents, lamenting lost Entwives. In its haunting verses, readers don't just see the sorrow of ancient tree herders, but also feel the weight of ages gone by. Or consider Bilbo's cheeky riddle game with Gollum. It's not just a battle of wits, but a cultural exchange, giving glimpses into their respective worlds. Tolkien's genius lay in recognizing that such literary devices could be more than just decorative flourishes. They could deepen the reader's immersion, making the world feel ancient and lived in. After all, what better way to understand a culture or a people than through their art, their folklore, their songs? And as with many of Tolkien's innovations, this symphony of words didn't go unnoticed. Subsequent fantasy authors, inspired by the maestro, began to weave their own anthems, ballads, and enigmas into their narratives. Realizing that these could be conduits to the very soul of their worlds, they embraced this harmonious approach with gusto. The standard for trilogies. Picture this. Tolkien, after years of painstaking work, finally hands over his magnum opus, expecting it to be embraced as the singular epic it was intended to be. Instead, the publishers, probably after a dramatic gulp and a long stare at the sheer bulk of the manuscript, decide, let's slice it into 3 parts. And just like that, instead of one colossal volume of The Lord of the Rings, we got a triad. The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Now, this wasn't just a whimsical decision to test the strength of bookshelves worldwide. In the post-war era, with economic considerations like paper shortages, publishing such a monolithic tome wasn't just challenging, it was near impossible. Splitting the narrative into 3 distinct parts was a practical solution, and it turned out to be a stroke of unforeseen genius. This unintentional trilogy inadvertently laid down a blueprint for fantasy literature. The 3-act structure, inherent in most great narratives, found a perfect fit in the trilogy format. The setup, the confrontation, and the resolution naturally flowed into 3 separate volumes, each with its own peaks and troughs, yet contributing to a larger, cohesive narrative. Other fantasy authors took note. Suddenly, trilogies became the order of the day. They allowed for expansive world-building, intricate character development, and plots that could twist and turn over hundreds of pages before reaching a satisfying climax. Think about it. How many times have you picked up a promising fantasy book only to realize it's the first in a trilogy? That's Tolkien's and his publisher's legacy at work. The split not only benefited Tolkien's tale, giving readers natural breaks to catch their breaths from all the hobbit hopping and orc chopping, but it also reshaped the very structure of epic fantasy. Authors and publishers alike recognized the merits of the trilogy format, both in terms of storytelling and, let's face it, sales. In the end, The Lord of the Rings being carved into thirds was serendipity at its finest. Influence on popular culture. It began with a ring, a rather unassuming bit of gold that unexpectedly embarked on an epic journey. And as that journey unfolded, it didn't just stay confined to the inked pages of Tolkien's world. Like a particularly ambitious hobbit, The Lord of the Rings stepped out of its cozy literary shire and ventured into every nook and cranny of popular culture. Let's begin with the most luminous of these footprints, the film adaptations. Peter Jackson's cinematic rendition didn't just give faces to beloved characters, it painted Middle-earth in vivid, breathtaking strokes. From the serene vistas of Rivendell to the looming menace of Mount Doom, the films captured imaginations and box offices alike. What's more, they heralded an era where epic fantasy, once reserved for bookish types whispering about wizards in dimly lit corners, was suddenly front and center, dazzling audiences in IMAX. But the silver screen was merely one stop in Middle-earth's pop culture conquest. The enchanting realms of Tolkien's creation morphed into pixelated landscapes in video games, allowing fans to personally duel with Balrogs or, at the very least, engage in a spot of orc bothering. Board games saw players strategically navigating the perils of Middle-earth, and if you've ever played a tabletop RPG, you've Tolkien to thank for those elves, dwarves, and halflings on your character sheets. Beyond the realms of entertainment, Middle-earth even carved a niche in the very fabric of our real world. Case in point, New Zealand. Those once quiet islands, known for their sheep and rugby, now also stand as the living, breathing embodiment of Tolkien's landscape. Tourists, in their droves, descend upon its shores, eager to tread the very ground that Frodo and Sam did, cinematically, at least. The nation embraced its Middle-earthen identity with arms wide open, showcasing to the world the sheer transformative power of a well-told tale. The Lord of the Rings demonstrated that epic fantasy wasn't just a niche genre, destined to gather dust on high library shelves. It could be a cultural powerhouse, influencing entire industries, from cinema to tourism. It proved that tales of heroism, magic, and Middle-earthen mischief weren't just for a select few, but had a universal appeal, resonating with hearts across the globe. Tolkien's timeless tapestry. Piecing together threads from ancient myths, age-old legends, and rich literary traditions, Tolkien didn't merely write a story, he spun a masterpiece. Each thread, meticulously selected, became part of a grander tapestry, depicting a world as detailed and tangible as our own. Yes, the myths he drew from were not his invention. Elves had sung their songs and dwarves had swung their axes long before Bilbo decided adventures weren't so bad after all. Yet Tolkien's genius lay not in the invention of entirely new threads, but in the way he wove them together. By infusing his academic expertise with a boundless imagination, he gave these tales a fresh luster, making them shine in ways they hadn't before. The landscapes of Middle-earth, the languages of its races, the trials of its heroes, and the depths of its lore are, in themselves, wonders to behold. It's magical in the truest sense of the word. The Lord of the Rings is not just a narrative, it's an experience. One that invites readers to lose themselves in its pages and then compels them to see the world with renewed wonder. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of Tolkien's impact are evident in every corner of popular culture. Whether it's an author meticulously crafting their fantasy world, a filmmaker attempting to capture the same lightning in a bottle, or a game designer sculpting realms of adventure, all bear traces of Tolkien's influence, knowingly or otherwise. In wrapping up this exploration of Tolkien's influence, one thing is abundantly clear. His vision of Middle-earth, though rooted in the past, is timeless. As generations of readers have found, and future generations will surely discover, in the heart of Tolkien's work lies a universal truth: the power of storytelling to captivate, inspire, and bring a touch of magic to the everyday. To put it simply, while others have penned tales, Tolkien cast spells. And the enchantment of Middle-earth? Well, it's far from wearing off. Thanks for listening. Please hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. To find out more about John Cronshaw and his work, visit johncronshaw.com.